We've got three guys here that I'll let introduce themselves, but it's a pretty exciting evening to have all three of them, very different industries, very different backgrounds, talk about product strategy, talk about being a CEO, working with their VP of product, CPO, et cetera, to set product strategy. And hopefully you guys will be able to dig in and get some lessons that they wish they would have known 10 years ago, 15 years ago when they were just starting out. I think that's it for getting started. So you want to kick us off, Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt. I'm the CEO of Mews. We're a hospitality tech company, so we build solutions for hotels. So when you walk into the lobby of a hotel and you stand in a queue at a reception desk, we're trying to solve that problem. So we're really trying to completely overhaul the technology in hotels so that you can just walk in a hotel, go straight to your room without having to queue up ever at a reception desk. So that's the core that we solve, but we do a lot more.
Awesome. And Hubert, I think some of the people might know you, but you're usually in San Francisco. You're all the way here in Prague this entire month.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Hubert. I'm the founder and CEO of Productboard. Thank you for being here with us. We're excited to host you. Thank you, Steven, for moderating. And welcome guests. This is wonderful. And as Steven said, I'm based out of San Francisco, but I'm from Prague originally. I've lived there for 15 years, but this is my home, where I come from. And Productboard is a product management platform. And we help product makers create great products, get the right products to market faster. That's one of the taglines that we use. And really, we founded the company with Daniel, my co-founder, who might be here somewhere, with the realization that we all kind of believe and understand that customers needs to stand in the center of product decision making, but somehow none of the tools available in the whole product development process even have the entity of a customer in them. Like there's no field in Jira, there's no way to capture insights. And we said, let's change that and let's create a system that's going to be really customer-centric and is going to help drive product decisions. And so that's what we're building. So thank you for being here, and let's talk about product strategy.
Honza.
Thank you. So I'm Honza. I'm originally from Brno, which is kind of fun, right? And the thing is that I founded a company called DataWebs, I don't know, 8 years ago. And then I exited here last year, and it was like SaaS data company. And now I am managing director of Heureka. I suppose that maybe those who live here, I suppose, know Heureka as the marketplace and price comparison site. So that's basically me in a nutshell.
Awesome. So we're going to kick it off. We're going to talk about product strategy. All three of you have different backgrounds, and I think you'll bring kind of different perspectives to what it means. But we'll just start who's closest to me. Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe your background and how your background informed your thoughts on product strategy, going from a person who had the pain to a person solving it?
Yeah. I grew up, I always knew I was going to be a hotelier. So from the age of 4, that was my ambition. I wanted to work in hotels, and then I did hotel school, went into hotels, worked at Hilton for 10 years. And until 2012, I was still working in DOS. So it was like quite a backwards technology, and it hasn't got much better.
What's DOS?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
This blue screen without a mouse. And then at some point, Richard, the founder of Mews, he became a friend of mine, and he's like, I'm building this hotel, and I'm not putting a reception desk in. And I was like, so what are you doing? Because Oracle can't support that. There's no mobile Oracle solution that does that. And I jumped. I was like, I'm 30. What's the risk I'm taking? I've got no kids, no mortgage. Let's do it. And at this point, I literally only knew how to make a PowerPoint and an Excel. So I knew nothing about building a product. So we literally came into an office with Richard, myself, Honza, our CTO today, and basically we had 2 developers, and we're just like talking about the problems that we had faced in hotels, because we really had felt the problem that we were trying to solve by building our own hotel without a reception desk. But we'd never heard of product management. So the first few years, we literally just were talking about the problems. We would whiteboard a screen, and then we'd iterate that whiteboard, and they would start coding, and then that was it. There was no design to it. It was just a screen in a system that we constantly iterated. And then a few years in, we had Heureka, which was one of our very first developers who came in. He was a roommate of Honza at the time. And he's like, I read this book, the Marty Kagan book, and he's like, there's this thing called product management. We should probably consider it. And I was like, really? That sounds like more overhead that we're bringing in. Do we really need these people? Because it's going to slow us down. I can tell you what the problems are, and you just build it. And I'm so glad that they didn't listen to me and they override my decision, which I always love when it's well argumented. And Heureka became our first chief product officer at that time. And then we started learning about how, actually you need to do discovery. Because in the early phase, I was the one that felt the problem. I'd literally stood in front of guests feeling the problem. So I kind of knew, but as you start to diversify your customers, they don't all have the same problem that I had. And I wasn't patient enough to do discovery. So Heureka really started thinking about how do you build a product organization, and you need designers and you need product managers, and we're in a very different place today. I think we've got about 25 different product teams and a huge bunch of designers on top of that. So we've definitely grown way beyond what my initial experiences were. I just thought we need lots of developers to build a product, and I was very wrong. And it's okay to be wrong, and that was probably my biggest lesson.
Awesome. And Hubert, I think you have a similar kind of intro where you also felt the pain. You were kind of like, why is there no product like this?
Yeah. I mean, my story is slightly different in the sense that I was a product manager and I felt the pain, and I was basically solving the pain for myself. And so I understood the product management discipline, and I was just frustrated that there's no tools to help me do the job and do the job in a way that is the right modern way, customer-centric way. And I was in a situation before where I was a VP product, and it was just like incredibly painful to get alignment and understand what should be the focus for the company, because everybody had different perception of the needs, and everybody had different perception of, like what you said, there's very different personas, and everybody imagines slightly different segment of the market that you're after. And the irony is, we're building a product management software company. We still have these pain points because it's difficult to do it at scale, and we'll probably talk more about it. The challenges around defining it and so on. But the core premise with which I founded the company is that it's really important to have focus, and it's important to have clarity about what you're doing at every point in time. And a lot of startups confuse the vision with like the immediate next step. And so, I mean, you probably heard it a lot of times. It's like, oh, we're like, Uber for this, and we're solve everything, and we're for everybody. And that's kind of great as a vision if you think long ahead, but you need to be very intentional about how you get there, because you can't build everything at the same time. And the steps that you take, the milestones along the way, that's the strategy, and that's the hard decisions that they're hard. I mean, so many companies failed at that. And if you know the story of Apple, how when Steve Jobs came back, the first thing that he did, he cut the product lines. He was like, we're just gonna have 4 products. That's it. We're not gonna have however many tens of products they had, right? And that was a strategic decision, focus, and so on. And there's an example like that. So we'll probably get deeper into it, but the product strategy is core of the company strategy. It's all tied together, and it's very important to have clarity around it. And as we'll probably hear, as you scale, it's just like you can't avoid it, or you're just not going to scale successfully.
I totally agree. So there wouldn't be no arguments, but I just want to add that when it comes to like building company, one of the best reasons to start a company is that you have an urge to solve some problem. And that's like most important part of the strategy, let's say the company vision, whatever, etc. And based on this, you can like fulfill the product strategy. And if you love your product that much more than your customers, then most probably it's not about the solving the problems, but about like cherry picking the stuff to the products. And that's really like highway to hell, I suppose. That's one thing that I wanted to add. And also, maybe this is not the situation that you are talking about, but there is always so much stuff to do, like so many ideas. And the product strategy for me is also, let's say, the process, how to get rid of, all ideas are great in some point, right? But how to get rid of or postpone the ideas on the backlog that aren't, let's say, important or valuable at the moment, and decide which of them would be implemented and how to find out the process, how to find out which of them should be implemented. I think this is also the part of the strategy. So what we wouldn't do, that's it. Yeah.
And building on that, those 2 points, both of those seem like things that you figured out along the way that maybe were problematic, and then you learned like, oh, let's not do it that way. If you could go back in time and tell yourself another piece of advice, like what would you give to like the young version of yourself that hasn't learned these things yet?
Okay, that's a great question. Can I ask you guys who wants to like start hers or his own company? If you like in the future, if you can raise your hands, you don't have to, guys. Okay, some. Okay, so some of you. So I think this is just the stuff I wish I knew, and it's always, let's say, difficult at the beginning when you have like 5 customers. And you are like on a meetup like this, let's say, and there are companies like we have like thousands or millions of customers and B2C customers, and we do A/B testing on this stuff and A/B testing on that stuff and control groups and whatever. And I have 5 customers. I can't A/B test them, right? So the important thing is when is the right time to switch from I do it based on, let's say, my guts or small research, as you were saying, into I need a CPO to do that and to do the product strategy. So I think that the most of the typical problem is to leave it for the later. We don't need now that. I know what we are doing, right? That's it. I know our customers, right? That's really the thing that I think that I, for example, should have done earlier.
Can I jump into this? I think it would be valuable for the people here to give them some examples of the strategic decisions that we made as companies, or how we scaled that, so that they can imagine it. Because I talk about this topic frequently, and it's difficult and abstract. And can you also share examples of like some of the strategic shifts and how you, as you scaled the company, where did you start, how you narrow down the segments, or how did you decide what to focus on, what not to focus on, and so on?
Basically, there are like 2 different companies, for example, that I've been, let's say, working on. In DataWebs, the startup one, we had something about like less than 200 customers, strictly B2B. So there were like no kind of like A/B testing. There were like just user research based, like not quantitative but qualitative mostly, and stuff like that. And it made huge sense because they were paying like a lot of amount of money each of them, so big contracts. On the other hand, now in Heureka Group we have like millions of customers, mostly like B2C, and there it totally makes sense to do this testing and user research, and we have like team of researchers who do the research amongst like nine countries, who work kind of strangely completely differently. So it works something in one country, in the other country it works the opposite. So it's kind of funny sometimes. Huh? But in this company, I'm not the product guy. Actually, I'm MD, so I'm responsible for mostly for the business.
We'll probably get to it even more, because I'm curious, how you're segmenting the market and how you're making a decision who to go after. I'll give you an example in our case, right? I describe how we started a company and like, hey, we're going to create this product management platform and it's going to be for product managers. But then obviously I had some understanding of the market because I was a product manager, but my view of the market, similar to yours, it was like a narrow segment, right? Because like I was a VP product, so I was like, senior person. I was at a startup building a digital B2B software, right? So it was like a sliver. And then as we started digging into it, it's like, oh, B2B is different from B2C. Oh, there's quite big differences if you're building like different types of digital products. If it's like a digital first company versus, digital transformation company that's introducing like supporting, solutions. There's differences obviously, based on the size of the organization and complexity of the product portfolio. There's difference in terms of whether the product team has the power politically inside the company to make decisions versus is it more sales driven or more technology engineering driven company. And there's definitely differences if you're, individual PM on the team or if you're the senior person. And so all that started kind of coming back to us as we were having the conversations. And then the strategy that we kind of started seeing, there's like, okay, so let's start with like individual product managers' needs, who's building digital product that is very simple and it's in the B2B space. And I'm simplifying it was more complex. But that was the intentional, like, it's not the biggest market, but we're going to start there and we're going to solve those pain points really well until we expand further, right? And then over time, it's like if you look at now, Productboard is 8 years old, we've made changes where we're like, okay, now let's start supporting companies that have multiple product teams and we need to introduce collaborative functionality. And then let's start introducing functionality for the senior execs that need to have visibility across the organization. And we know that going forward, there's more personas that we will need to go after the use cases for customer success people or for product marketers or for sales that's interacting with product like discipline or function, right? And so it's like a very thought out, it's not linear, it's not perfect, but like there is some rhyme that you're trying to figure out like how you're segmenting the market. Because again, if we said at the beginning, oh, let's just build this whole platform, it's going to have all these features and we're going to start building, all of them at the same time, like you're just never going to build it. It's like, I used this before, if it's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to build city like New York and I'm going to start by building brick by brick of all the buildings at the same time, like, you're not going to have any building built, right? So anyway, I hope that it gives you a little bit of example of the understanding of what are the segments, what are the patterns, what are the criteria along which you can segment the market, and that you can then put down on paper and say like, this is who are we building for now, and then maybe, who are we going to build for later, and never, like strategically, which market you want to play. I'm curious in your case because like there's different kinds of hotels, right? There's different kinds of hospitalities, and like you're probably thinking about this all the time, right?
Yeah. In the early days, we went, let's do it. Whatever opportunity came our way. And I think it's sometimes good in the early stage to just go after any opportunity. And we'd gone for hotels first and we just couldn't find customers. We struggled so badly. And then we got this hostel, Mosaic House, they've now converted to a hotel, but it's like, sure, it's hostel, like it's just like a hotel. And we just jumped and we went from 50 rooms in the first hotel to 500 units in this next one. And I just came on site. I was like doing the training. And then I realized that a hostel is nothing like a hotel. Like a check-in is 15 backpackers at the same time needing to get into their rooms. And it was horrible. But had we not done that, had we not made these crazy commitments early on, we wouldn't have pushed our product team to the max to deliver group check-in and group checkout at that point. So don't have too much focus early on. Like try and spread out, but also know when you're losing and to pull out of projects. And we have also pulled out of situations where like, okay, we're in the wrong country. Like, we went live with a hotel in Russia at the time and there was all these data privacy laws and we're like, that's probably not smart. And we pulled away from it. So initially I would say, don't have too much focus, too narrow, look around because maybe the product that you've built can fit other segments as well. You can adopt it. And I'm so glad that we did hostels at the time because suddenly we're the market leader in hostels today. That's like one of our segments where we're clearly the winner. And it was just a product decision by accident because I committed and punch above your weight sometimes, and then you have to deliver. And that drive gets your product teams going. Like if you have to deliver on something or a deadline, and suddenly it's possible. Like you always hear like it's not possible. There's not enough time. When you have to, it is very possible to deliver certain things.
I'm curious, Matt, like you were talking about the hostel market. I know you're a Productboard customer, so there's maybe some way to get feedback in. Before Productboard, how were you listening to like the different segments and how were you like understanding what your customers actually needed?
Like I knew all of the customers early on.
You were just calling them up.
Like I onboarded them, right?
Okay.
At the beginning, I was the one selling and onboarding and everything. And at some point, we started adding people into the business. And initially, we loaded all of the feedback in GitHub which is where the developers were sitting, and we just have all these activities with feedback, but you could never link it back to the deal and the revenue linked to the deal. So how do you then prioritize? And I think that was the point when we first onboarded with Productboard, so we could actually link the revenue linked to the feature request and actually start measuring, which one makes the most sense to deliver. But it took the pain of feeling it. Like at some point you have hundreds of GitHub issues that you just can't organize anymore, because we used to do it in a room with like 5 developers, myself, our product leader, and we're like every week we'd go through all of them, we'd reprioritize all of them, and at some point it doesn't work anymore. And then you just got to admit defeats, go look around, and then you find that there's great solutions on the market that actually have probably solved the problem that you're having. Like I love Google in that early phase. Today I can't get away with Googling my way through life, but in the early phase, you always, there's probably a company that has solved for a problem that you're trying to solve already. Just find it on Google.
Honza, I'm curious, you've got millions of users. How do you keep on top of the different markets and their needs?
Yeah, basically, as I see it here, we are the only company here who doesn't use Productboard. So
You can talk to this guy after the meetup.
Okay. So I'll talk to the guys in product. And so that's one thing. But I'm here for the business, so I'm here for the discount too. And the thing is that mostly when we are really deciding about some features, whether it's going to be implemented or not implemented, mostly the thing that we are, let's say, counting is like value for our customers. Will it bring them value? The other thing is usability. Would they even use it, or would they be able to understand what we are bringing them? The third one is feasibility, and I think that it's like dirty part of product management, let's say, because I have so many cool features. You bring it to the tech team, and they go like, sorry, we have, technical debt, and we need to do these changes in the product. Like, it wouldn't bring that much value, but we would have to do that. I think that all companies are like struggling with it, but not much of the PR people, product management, or even PR people, or whatever, are sharing these issues, because
we don't want to talk about that. There's no technical debt here.
Okay. I can understand. I hear you. Okay. So it's feasibility. And the last one, like critical decision, is like, is it a strategic thing for us? Like, does it make sense? Does it make sense for our stakeholders and stuff like that? So based on this decision, we can value like every feature. And then we implement it or test it, and stuff like that.
I do agree with your debts. Like it's a real thing that we face. Like we have a whole new design team, and they came up with these stunning designs. And I'm already thinking, oh God, like what are the reasons that our tech team are going to give us why we can't do it? And some things they can do, but like the pure vision, I know I'm going to get pushback. And I also know that it is possible, but I have to say you can take twice the amount of time to do it. So there's a real cost to doing it. And that's a decision that the product managers then have to make. Is it worth delivering it in 2 or 3 times the amount of time? But it's a real issue, that we encounter all the time.
Hubert, I'm curious, before Productboard, how did you understand your customers? How did you enable your teams to understand your customers?
We would centralize feedback in spreadsheets. We would count who needs what. We would create personas. We would put presentations together. I would draw like blue ocean strategy. That's a concept that came out of INSEAD Business School. Like the different important values for different segments and how they match what you have right now and which segment you want to go after and so on. It was just a very arduous process. It was, complex and it was slow, very slow. Like, because like you're just like maintaining this set of assets to reflect your knowledge of the market is very difficult. And then, like I mentioned already, there's typically different people in the company have different perception of the market because they are exposed to different sources and types of customers and different sources of conversations. So sales knows what the prospective customers want. They might be selling ahead and they're selling future vision, versus support knows the pain points of the existing customers. Marketing is in the middle and they understand what competition is doing. Customer success, again, like pain points of customers, like to retain them and so on. And the job of the product management is to be the connecting tissue, listen to customers directly, but there is decentralized pockets of knowledge. Like the salespeople, they're having hundreds of conversations, thousands of conversations a month, and so that's like super valuable input. And you need to organize it somehow, and so that's that's the hard job, as you said. Like at some point it doesn't scale, and at some point you need to start seeing patterns and clusters and higher level. Yeah, and then the other thing that I would just highlight is, the different people in the company have different expertise, and how do you share the knowledge, and how do you, all this understanding of customers, and whether it's product strategy or sales and marketing, stems from how well do you understand the customers, and if somebody new comes to the company, how well you onboard them, how quickly you help them get the context. And so that's another need, or another pain that the strategic alignment and direction solves, is like you help people create a mental model of like, hey, this is how we're thinking about the market, this is the buckets, go and learn about this segment, or this is the pain point, and so on. Because otherwise people have different mental models, they think about it differently, they have different segments and so on. So anyway, I want to talk about the structure aspect of the strategic framework that can help get people aligned.
It seems like you said it's a lot of work. It's a lot of maintaining all these different files. There's a lot of synthesizing all these different perspectives. Do you think that's why being a customer-centric organization is actually really hard? Is just the level of effort it takes to actually maintain that over time?
Well, I think it's hard to create the shared understanding of like how the world looks like, and then keep that up to date for everybody to have that understanding the same. If you're like, hey, how do you think about the market? Where are we today, and where do you want to go tomorrow? And how are we going to expand to what market? That if you have a lot of people, like we have now over 500 people at Productboard, just like, and there's people come in and go in, and like, how do you keep people informed? And it's that's very hard. That's why you have the vision. That's why you have clarity, hopefully, about it. That's why you have the strategic framework. That's why you have the planning, and you're planning, for 3 years and then 12 months, right? And then you're planning for the quarter. All these processes are supporting this shared understanding and breaking pieces into the big pieces into smaller pieces. We can give probably again like specific examples, right? I'm curious, like, do you have an example, like maybe example of like a strategic decision that you made that was incorrect?
Yeah, a lot of them. Yeah, yeah. I think that, for example, the most of my strategic decisions that I made that were incorrect were before I hired the CPO, and it was basically when and it's so difficult decision. And those of you who will start the company will eventually face it, and it's like I'm having 20 customers, whatever. And this one is paying huge amount of money, and he needs some feature. And I need that money so I can hire 5 more new developers. But it's not in a strategic context of our product. And other customers wouldn't need that feature. So yeah, it's tough. It's really tough decision. Mostly if you are at CEO level, let's say, and you are like product oriented. I suppose like you are like, no way, we are gonna stick to our, let's say, product strategy. If you are more like business oriented, as I am, maybe you met also, and we're like, yeah, we can do that. That's okay. It's gonna bring us a lot of money. So there were like a lot of decisions like this that I made. That's one thing. And when I hired like the first, his name was Siri also, which is kind of funny. Maybe it's a like good name for the product managers. I don't know. And the first thing that he did, he actually put a meme on my monitor in my office. I have it here, the meme, yeah. And it's really. It's really this one, like competitor releases a new feature, CEO and product manager. Yeah. And I always, let's say, try to remember that it's not the way how the product management should work. And I did learn it the hard way, because when you are starting, you don't see in the future that you would have to support that feature next 10 years or something like that. You see it like it's small workaround, it can work. So that's one of the mistakes that I made, definitely. Strategic.
Yeah, no, I think the shortcuts has been one of my lessons. At some point, we would have, I'm the salesperson, so I will offer anything to a customer, and I've learned to not do that anymore, because suddenly, you have debts again that you put in the system that you can't get rid of. Very early in our journey, actually, we were building the B2B product, and it's a very long slog. It's a very complex product. And it's really hard to sign up customers in the beginning when you build a difficult product, because it doesn't have all the features and functionality. So at some point, we're like, let's just give up and let's just build this one feature that everyone's so excited about and see if we can sell it as a standalone. And we ditched, or we kind of put that on ice, and then we went to this shiny feature, and it didn't work. Like, it didn't work on its own without the core that we were doing, the core problem that we were solving. And don't always let, when you talk to investors, outsiders who sell, like, just do that nice shiny thing. That's going to be it. You know what the problem is that you're solving and where to do it, and don't get too distracted sometimes by outside voices, especially in the early days. And that was definitely one of our big mistakes that we made, and we probably lost a few months with that by focusing on this one shiny thing. And in the end, it didn't add much value for us.
Building on that, Matt, there's a question that's one of the top voted ones about balancing between customer research, understanding the market, understanding your own gut feeling. What is the heuristic you use now so that you don't chase those things that are maybe a short-term win, but maybe not a long-term strategic move?
A hard one to answer. There's so many inputs that we get now from the business, from sales, through Salesforce, through Productboard, through quality interviews that we have, but also through our strategic outcomes that we're trying to have as a business. So what we try and do is we put our strategy out for 18 months. We have our OKRs in there that give direction. So if you have to make a decision, let the OKRs guide you in which direction that decision should go. So for example, we say France and the US are the core markets for us. So does it fit in those OKRs? Because those features get priority. So there has to be a framework within which you create the product thinking as well, that it aligns with what the company is doing. But at some point, somebody needs to pull a plug or make a decision. And I always try to look for the product leaders, but at some point it becomes a leadership discussion, because you are investing in a specific thing that you're doing. And there isn't always a right answer, and you just don't know until you jump and you build the one thing to see if that's actually the solution or not. And as long as you have enough data and input that you get, you have to trust your gut in the end. Like, that's what an entrepreneur does. Understanding what the problems is, looking at all the data points with a scout mindset, not with your own mindset. Like, really openly listen to all of the inputs and then jump. I think that there's always a jump moment.
I would add to we had kind of several conversations about the failures, and then what you're asking about. I would just want to add on the failures thing that maybe ironically, we're building a platform, we're building a tool for listening and organizing all of it, and so that's kind of what you're saying, that you need to get the inputs, right? You need to get the inputs. You can't be making just intuition. If it's internalized experience, is great. If it's just like a gut feeling, not based on experience, like you can't rely on it, right? So the inputs, your brain is processing the inputs, but then you need the process. So ironically, what we've done at Productboard is, I forgot that the people that we would bring to the company don't have all the context and the structure that I have and the understanding, and like right now we're in the process of defining clearer vision and strategy for next 3 years, because we're just operating, building, and the initial founder perspective, and people kind of knew what we were doing, but at this scale, we just need much more structure, and we haven't had that. And that's that's kind of, it's easy to forget, because if you are like us, in the business for years, and you have such intimate understanding of the market, and we're not smarter than anyone else, right? That's not about like you're smart. That's about you've just been thinking longer about that problem, and you've been talking to more people. And it's easy to forget that and get frustrated with somebody who just joined the company, 3-6 months ago, even a year ago, right? Like, come on, like you don't get it. Like, of course not. Like, you haven't talked to, thousands of customers like I have. And so that's our job, I feel like, to share that context as much as possible. And not just say like, no, it can be this way, but like why, and like point people to go and talk to these people so that you get the context. And it's just like, it's painful, but in my mind, it's like a problem of human education and sharing information in general. Anyway, I just wanted to smuggle this learning and failure in. You asked something else though, or like you wanna?
I just wanted to add to the original question.
Yeah.
But if you want to,
No, but this is like, there's an intersection here, right? Like, you make mistakes, like you're going off of your gut, but you can also do market research and make mistakes. And so I thought these were really intertwined with, like, mistakes aren't always bad. They're a learning moment. And the origin of the decision that led you down to that mistake, that can be very different, but it's more about what you learn from the situation. But go ahead.
I just wanted to add that there is, to the original question, that there is always like good to know and understand whether it's like one-way door or two-way door. You can go back. So you try as many decisions as possible, do as like two-way door. Like, try it didn't work out, so I continue. It didn't work out, so I go back, kill the feature or whatever. So do the testings as soon as possible, failure testing, whatever, and research like that. But there are some decisions that are by nature one-way door decisions. For example, in Heureka, we are like originally price comparison site, and we decided that we want to switch to being like marketplace, which is completely different, let's say business model, whatever. And it's something, it takes like years of development and years of changing, and now you cannot test something that would take years and you believe that the market would look like that in 5 years, and you have to 3 years, whatever, and you have to be there. You just, for this, you can't test it, and you have to unfortunately use the gust very often.
Matt, you mentioned, sorry, go ahead. Okay, you mentioned OKRs. I assume that you read the book, you learned about it immediately. Day two of the company, you rolled out OKRs, you were perfect at it.
We still suck at it.
What was kind of like your journey into finding like a good strategic framework that would like help you scale the organization in terms of making good decisions?
I don't know yet. Like, it's still a struggle. Like, when we started OKRs about 3 years ago, we had read the book, and we're like, right, let's do it. And then you start with, I think it's quarterly is what they recommend.
Sure.
And we just struggled with it because it doesn't come to life. You've got to all live it and commit to it. And it quarter after quarter, we're like, this sucks. Like, and we're like, the period is too short. We're building a really complex product. We make commitments, and then we shift completely focus in the next quarter to some other idea that we have. So we now do a year cadence effectively. So we've got a full year cadence. We set 2 major goals, and we're now half year in, and we're like, we're missing a third one. So maybe we're adding a third one to the mix. And that's working. It's kind of working for us at the moment, but it's really hard to find a strategic framework that works unless you all commit to it. And you may not agree with it, but as long as you all commit to it on the leadership table and really execute on it and try it, and it's okay to say it doesn't work, let's iterate on it. The book isn't what you have to always do. Like, your company is unique. Listen to the feedback that you're getting, iterate it. And, right now, a year cadence on OKRs, it kind of works. We're going to probably stick with it for now. But maybe next year I'll tell a very different story. And like, read the book, read multiple books, get the perspectives, and then do the thing that you think is the right thing.
Matt, can I ask you, do you use OKRs only just for the product part of the company or for the whole company?
Yeah, we use them for the whole company. So we basically say, this is the direction that we want to go into. And then we start to theme them into the objectives that we have. And then the underlying key results, there's probably some product key results in there, and then the product team can take those into smaller OKRs.
I like OKRs. Sorry, I like the OKRs very much. We are also using them, and not, let's say, not working parts of OKRs. It's kind of like technological debt. No one wants to talk about that, right? So.
Yeah, that's the third the third one that we're adding now. Like we should probably do something on quality as well. So yeah.
I just wanted to add that again, some examples of we're using OKRs, but we suck at it, and
We're getting better every cycle.
no, but I talked to John Doerr, who wrote one of the recent books. He's a Kleiner Perkins, our investors partner, so we have access to him several times about this, and he said, like, it doesn't have to be perfect, like as long as it helps you narrow down the focus, and not everything is like super measurable, but as long as it helps you answer like, hey, can we at the end of the quarter discuss whether we made progress as much or not as much as we wanted. It doesn't have to be like a specific metric. I would say that's one learning, that it can be looser and still be effective, right, to drive focus in the company. And then some of the mistakes that we made, we haven't been consistent. We haven't been like, starting with me, consistently talking about the objectives rigorously and repeatedly, and so that it's on top of everybody's mind. And every exec meeting, you start with the table and you see there the objectives, and you have little traffic lights like how you're doing. Like we haven't been doing it historically, and partially because we had nobody responsible for like owning that process across the company initially. Now we have a chief of staff, and we're changing that. But it was one definitely like a big failure there, and so on. The second one I would say is that the objectives need to be specific and not try to like, oh, we need to have objectives where everybody at the company is gonna see that they're contributing. Like basically what I'm trying to say is okay that there's some people who are working on things that are not part of these objectives. Like in our case, we had this debate last year because we have the SMB segment, smaller customers, and then enterprise. And you can kind of, and we did like a vague objective where we said, hey, we're going to grow the business. And then underneath were like, key results for different segments. But it's actually okay to say that the focus is on enterprise. That doesn't mean that you're not going to do anything else, but you just want to be intentional and you want to highlight it. And, that's been a struggle. It's like, well, how is the SMB team going to feel about that? Well, it doesn't mean that they're not important. It's just like, hey, that's the next thing, So anyway, just like some lessons learned there.
I'm curious, below the OKR framework, Hubert, you've thought a lot about how to make strategic decisions on the product side. You want to talk a little bit about that?
You mean how to use the framework to drive?
Well, you kind of have this model for how to think about kind of what's core product versus what's going to expand into new markets versus what's sort of like technical infrastructure, which I think is a good model.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a framework guy. I mean, look at Productboard. It's kind of it's my baby because it's a structured view of the world and it helps you set criteria and so on. But I feel like that when you have a large company, when you have a lot of people, having frameworks is useful because it provides like a unified language and unified perspective. So, for example, what we're talking now about is a framework where you have basically, for the current market, for the current segment, there's like 3 buckets. Table stakes, what is it that is like core flow, what people expect? You need to have that as a parity. If somebody starts using your product, like, it's expected. Second is like, what are the differentiators? What are you going to do that's going to delight customers, that's going to pull you ahead of competition? Like, what is the new thing that is like making you unique in your unique value proposition and so on? The third one is technical debt because it's competing, right? And so that's for your current segment. And then if you are expanding into a new segment, into a new market, there's probably a fourth category. So in our case, like enterprise is going to larger and larger customers. That's like a specific, framework or a part of a framework. And the fifth one, the large one, is like customer specials. And it should be very small allocation of your budget. And like what you mentioned, like there's a big customer and so on. But sometimes it is important to save a big customer, right? And they might have some specific things. And it might be a customer special that's very much aligned with your company strategy. And then it's like, cool, maybe it means that you're pulling it forward on the roadmap and otherwise you would do it later. If it's something completely custom, like, it's a questionable thing, right? And it depends on the cost and, benefit and so on. But I feel like that if you have a framework like this that everybody understands and then everybody talks about table stakes versus technical foundation versus differentiator, you can then have as a leadership conversation about how much you're investing into which bucket. Or like how much this quarter should go into technical foundations, which technical debt is part of it, versus how much should be into differentiation versus what should go into the table stakes. or sometimes we talk about paper cuts and core flow friction and broken windows, but it's all in that framework covered. And so that unification of language important, it helps alignment and so on. Example, and there's more frameworks, right? I would say just one thing on this. There's no like best framework. It's just like so that you agree on one and you stick to it. And it might change and evolve, but like every point in time, there should be kind of the same structure. Because if different teams use different prioritization, criteria, like how are you driving consistency in decision making?
We are also using the OKRs for the whole company. And we also kind of have some things to improve, definitely. And what I want to say as a learnings, I totally, let's say, agree with like having some person who is like responsible for implementing the framework in-house and pushing it from the, let's say, top CX position through the company. It's really important. Otherwise, it would be just playground for some one department and never would get to the whole company. And the things that we are really struggling is like business as usual versus OKRs. Like, what is the business as usual that we have to do, and how much time do we have to allocate to the OKRs, which is really really difficult most of the time. But when it comes to OKRs, what I totally agree with what you said. Like, use the framework and some framework and stick to that. And what I love about the OKRs is the mind shift for most of the people when they understand the difference of output versus outcome. That's like the biggest shift when we are implementing into the company. I don't know whether you know the differences outputs versus outcome. Let's say outputs are the stuff that you do but doesn't change the behavior of your customer, for example. So I don't know if you are sales guys. So based on how many calls you do to your customers, it's outputs. I do 10 calls every day, but outcomes are how many deals I have signed, how many deals was sold. Yeah? And a lot of people in a lot of companies, even small companies, are focusing on outputs because it's so easy to measure them. I did 5 calls, it was cool, I can check and go for the next day. And showing them to the people in the company, like every day, you should focus on the outcomes because you are not here for calling people, you are here for signing deals. It's so obvious for the sales guys, of course, but it's less obvious for, I don't know, developers, product people, whatever. Yeah? And this is like the strongest part of this framework that I love the most.
Like, it's one of the things that we talk about a lot. Recently, we've talked much more about outcomes because often in these platforms you have feature lists, right? Customers ask you for features. They've seen something somewhere, they want that feature. But actually, is that the feature that's actually the best way to solve the problem that they're having? And we've really shifted the conversation very much towards outcomes and measuring how many more check-ins a person at a reception desk can do in hotels. If we see that number go up, we've deployed a feature that's clearly supporting it. And I don't even care what the feature is. As long as we can support that outcome, that's what we're trying to drive. And it's so hard. I get sucked into the feature listing. I'm like, oh, but they need this particular feature. I know that they need it. Maybe there's a better solution. And talking about features, it's too narrow in a mindset. But it's really hard to walk away from it just because we all think in features.
It's again about loving the problem, not your solution, right?
It doesn't mean that the features go away, right? You're ultimately building the feature, but it's like the framework in which you're thinking about it. It needs to have the problem framing.
There's a really good question at the top of the list, which is how often do you override product decisions from the product management team? So by a show of hands, how many fingers in the last month have you overridden a decision? No, I'm joking. But like, it's a conversation. So I'm curious, like when there's this trade-off, when the founders or the CEO have the broader context, what does that look like when you're like, no, this is the wrong way. We need to go this way instead.
Not much, actually. Like we do our all hands planning. So we divide the year in three parts, tertiles, and then we do an all hands planning where all of the product decision makers get involved. We have a product council, and I'm invited to that. And that's the 3 days when we make all of the roadmap decisions for the next 4 months. And I don't actually get involved after that point, also because I'm very busy on other sides of the business. But I also think it's not fair. Like I had my voice in that room, and I'm loud and clear in that room. But I also am just one of the voices. I'm not the strongest voice, and I try and keep repeating that because I don't have the full context. But after that point, I'm very rarely. I think Aldair, you're in the room. Do I ever override you, Aldair? Do I ever override your decisions? Rarely, right? No, did you hear that question mark at the end of his no?
It's no question mark. Is that tied to my bonus?
I'm laughing. It's like, you'll get a very different answer from like product founding CEO, right? Because like you are, you're part of the process. But that I wouldn't say it's like there needs to be the process that you're describing, that you have opportunity to impact the flow. And there's reviews at every company. I talked to Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, and he said, like, look, my only thing that is not movable on the calendar are product reviews. I still go to product reviews, and I'm a product guy, and I provide product context because I feel like I have context that maybe the people don't necessarily have, and there needs to be this constant, flow of feedback. And so that's important. Like what sucks is if you're missing in action, you let the teams go, and then you show up at the end for a review and you say like, hey, this sucks and you need to redo it, without being present and providing the feedback constantly or consistently. And obviously the involvement differs if it's something like super highly strategic and you're working on something that's like a big potentially expensive bet. Versus if it's something that you can launch it, you can iterate on it. Maybe it's not perfect, but it's like kind of lower stakes. That's what I would add.
Honza, you have a meme prepared, I think.
Yeah, I unfortunately have a meme for that. Because I am here, let's say, for the business perspective. I'm not doing the product decisions. So the meme here really is like, that's me, the person from business, the stakeholder. Oh, how is my product idea going? And the CPO says like, ask the product manager, which is the dog. And the dog is saying, no one cares about your feature. So this is how I feel in the company. And I think it's right, honestly. It's sad, but it's right, because it's really about if it's a good feature and it gets to the feature list and it makes sense, it should be there. And if I just love the feature and all the customers who wants that, but it doesn't make sense in those 4 areas that I was talking about, then no one cares about my feature.
We have a lot of noise often from the customer-facing departments who are like, they don't build anything that my customers care about. And starting the product council, it's about a year ago that we started, because previously we would just say, I have an open invitation, you can come. But a lot of people are too busy. So when you go into product council, you make a commitment to take the feedback from your teams and then to defend that discussion in that room. And it's actually cut a lot of the noise that we used to have from all of the sales teams and the customer success teams. Are like, no one ever listens to my feature. I'm like, no, you've got a voice in the room. This is the person that represents your team. Make sure that you do the pre-work before the all hands planning so that you have a full overview of what you need to fight for. And you may lose a few fights, but at least you were there with a voice that you fought for it. And I think the product council was quite a shift recently that cut some of that noise out.
So we're going to move into questions, but before that, we're going to crystal ball the future a little bit. So you're in the hospitality business. We just came through a pandemic. I think the US just announced that there's a recession there. Czech Republic's got like 20% inflation. Where do you think this world's going? How do you kind of see hospitality over the next 5 years?
I don't know. So the bigger, like right now we're in a resurgence, which is we're in a really strange place because we've come out of the pandemic where it was like at the worst of it, 70% of hotels were closed. So we had 2 incredibly difficult years. I'm like, thank God for a recession. Like that's at least, a little bit lighter than the pandemic. So if I look at 2008, like our hotels, there was an 8% impact on revenues in hotels. pandemic was way worse than that for us. So yes, we have to be realistic that hotels will probably feel some impact, but we're not going to go through what we've just gone through. And it was a great exercise. Like we've learned a lot of lessons in the pandemic about how to optimize cost, and that we could very quickly get to profitability if we need to. But just stay agile. That's the one thing that I've learned. And if we need to shift focus very quickly, we have that spirit in us still. There's so many early founders from Mews still in the business, and we can, if we need to, we can shift focus instantly. And that's an important thing, is that you don't build so much structure around you that you can't shift. But I'm honestly not too concerned about it. It's a worry, but it's not a massive worry for us.
I mean, I don't have crystal ball either, and we've been talking internally about this, that we just need to be focused. We need to, focus on efficiency, because we were in a different situation, or like, B2B software. I mean, depends on which industry. We saw a flat Q2 2020 because everybody was like, "Oh, pandemic hit," and like, what's happening with the world, right? And people are not buying software; they're trying to figure out what's going to happen to their lives. But then our growth accelerated, but not because we were not like Zoom, where suddenly like, oh, everybody needs to go and buy video conferencing solution, right? Because like you are fully distributed, because we are in a new category, and we had to earn the growth. Like our pandemic or the pandemic didn't help us directly. Now we're in a better spot than a lot of the companies. Were kind of like, oh, all this demand's here. We hired all these salespeople, and now the music stopped because pandemic's over, people are coming back, and and you haven't built a repeatable demand engine, and you can just rely on the one-off pandemic induced shock. So we are being more efficient. I think that we are going to see a deeper recession, and people are going to be tightening budgets. It's going to impact different industries differently, but I completely agree with you that it's about discipline execution. It's about adjusting your behavior, just like individual budgets. You're probably not going to go on expensive vacations, and you're going to think a little bit where you're spending money and so on. And companies are going to do the same. So you just need to be responsible, executives, right? And manage our companies accordingly.
I just want to add that I'm the lucky bastard here. Because we are in e-commerce business and also price comparison business. So during the pandemic, the e-commerce was like, oh, skyrocketing. And now where people want to save money, they go to price comparison site, right? So I'm kind of, let's say, welcoming it, if I can say. Sorry to say that, but yeah, that's how I see the future.
I think like we're in the process of doing our Series C, so we're out there talking to a lot of investors, and it's interesting to see there's this massive shift from growth for the sake of growth, where the only metric that matters is this massive revenue growth. And there's these companies that have been crazily overvalued in the last 2 years that are going to have a massive down round at this time, to a time when they're like, we still want the growth, but it has to be healthy growth. Like the other metrics, the margin, how your LTV to CAC ratio have to be really healthy. And that's been a real shift in conversations that we've seen, that there's more than one metric that matter, and that you have to have a view on it. And in our company, we've now introduced a scorecard that includes at the top of it the annual recurring revenue growth, but the next one is margin, and the next one is like your LTV CAC ratios, etc. So diversify the metrics that you look at is the only thing I would say.
Nice. So the first question off the top of the list is for Hubert. How long did it take for the first internal build of Productboard to be ready to use at Productboard?
Oh, it was a very long time, because we've done it was like over a year and a half. Well, we've built like 13 different versions, or the number kind of differs. You ask 13 different applications with like completely different concepts of the user experience, and solving slightly different problems before we arrived at the core solution. And it took like a year and a half, and it was really like a very lean startup approach to doing research and testing and iterating, which is just going to be the best concept to go with. Because, we knew that this is like, the core structure of the product, like you will make decisions that are going to be just so difficult to change later. And if you scale, it's just like so much pain. And so we thought like, hey, let's take it slowly at the beginning and figure out a good fit so that we don't need to do like re-architecture and change everything and, major pivots and so on. So, it took a while.
Nice. Matt, you mentioned that hostels are a big segment for you. How long did it take you to find your initial product market fit? Was it just like day one?
We went very fast because we had to. We were opening the hotel, Richard's family's hotel, and we had 3 months to get a product out, and it sucked so badly. Like it was breaking, and like the accountants absolutely hated us. I'm sure my face is on a dartboard somewhere in the back office. So but we had to go live, and then it took us about a year to get the next 10 customers, the next 10 hotels to sign on, and that was just awfully painful. And then you get into the cadence. When we signed Mosaic House, that was a real breakthrough. That was our number 6 customer, and it was a much larger one. And then suddenly you get in a stride. You're like, okay, I think we now got, it seems to be repeatable. And then we went international and we started signing hotels in Western Europe. And we instantly saw, right, Western Europe is more ready for the cloud than it is here in Czech Republic. And we actually don't have salespeople here because it's just too slow to grow here versus what we did in Western Europe. But it took us about probably a year before we had a few customers that are customers because they actually want the product versus they're friends of mine that I hard-handedly convinced to take our product on.
Nice. And Honza, you were mentioning earlier that you started this data company. How long did it take you to get that product market fit with your early customers?
Wow. It took, It was actually the situation when we started by building a solution for one customer, and we believed that it would scale. So it was the situation like the first customer was really like, okay, you have this problem, we can solve it like by some kind of data magic, whatever. And we did solve it by the data magic, whatever. And then we were able to sell it to the next customer within like next month, let's say. So we were growing in this case, in this situation. So it wasn't that hard. But on the other hand, we were growing on like mostly Czech or Eastern European markets, and the growth is really slow here, like compared to like Western countries. I totally signed that. Yeah.
Hubert, this one's for you. How do you know that a product decision you made is right or wrong? How do you know it's going in the right direction?
Well, do people use it? Do they find value in it? Like it's ultimately the customer's call. Like did it get the job done in a way that's not just utilitarian, but hopefully also delightful, and it solves needs, not just functional, but emotional. That's the best products, right? It's both of these dimensions. So it's, you can measure that. I also say, every person can make a decision or, have a feeling and certain conviction when you look at a product like, oh yeah, this is awesome. This is, this nails it or not. How good is that intuition is like based on your experience, right? And so the great product people are the people who understand the customers so intimately well that if you show them a mock-up, it's like, oh wow, yeah, this nails it. Like, Steve Jobs, like he was a great product person because he observed the world. He continues to talk to the customers. Like he developed such strong customer empathy that you can cut a lot of the feedback loops. Obviously, you can go to the market, you can test with the customers, and that's the absolutely most precise way how to get to the best product. It's also the longest one. And if you have internalized the people, if you can put yourself, like you knew for yourself what you needed, if you were to building it for somebody else, it's so hard. That's why it's so hard, like for agencies. I'm sure that there's people who work for agencies. If you're just like hired to build a product and you don't have the intimate understanding with the customer, like you're so limited in making the right product decisions. You're relying on somebody else to, tell you what to do, but it's kind of like a broken loop, And so there you need to go to the customers, but it's like super long. The clients are not going to give you the time, and then it like doesn't work. And anyway, it's a complete side story.
Honza, I'm curious, you started your own startup. You're now a managing director, CEO of a company. If you were to go 0 to 1 again, what resources would you rely on to like really help you get started?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and that's funny thing, because I was the first company, I was bootstrapping it, like without investments and stuff like that, and I think that I would never do that because it's so slow. It happens, for example, Mailchimp. I think it was bootstrapped, and I don't know how they are right now, whether they are, let's say, founding. Have investors or not, but that's something I wouldn't do. Again, that's one thing, and the other thing, I think at these times of the market, it's so no, I wouldn't say it's so very difficult. It's so very difficult to hire senior people that you need at the beginning of, because we started with like a lot of junior people, and they learn by doing also with you, and it's so much different when you hire like senior person and he's like, no, not this way, no, come on guys, it was like 10 years ago, this thing, and it pushes you so much faster. So that's definitely something that you need when you are starting the company. And nowadays, like everyone is so expensive. I think like compared to like 5 years ago, let's say. And I think the valuation dropped, but let's say the wages are like growing. So it's really difficult right now. So I was thinking about like what's the value proposition right now, and I think it's like helping people to be like better entrepreneurs. If you can help people to really understand the company, how company works, and this can be the value proposition for all the people who would like to join the company.
Matt, thinking about the very first version of your software, was it like a ton of features? Did you have like a specific MVP in mind? Like what was kind of the first version that you knew that like, okay, we've got it?
Like we knew what it had to do, which was check in, check out, produce a bill, and accept reservations. And I think once we got to that core where it did that, and we had a few exciting features, because that's super boring. But when you started having a few exciting features that drove automation, that's when we're like, okay, it's exciting. Then it took us about 2 years before we really had something which could stand on its own legs and could compete against other solutions. In those first 2 years, we sold purely on vision and like the excitement of what we were building. But at some point, you have to actually deliver some of those things. And yeah, it was always slower. Like we were bootstrapped. I actually think it was a good thing for us to not have enough money to waste it on lots and lots of projects. We only got to build one thing. We had only 5 developers, so you get to build one thing, and you better do it right because that's all the money we have. And it does build a certain type of behavior. Do I want to go through bootstrapping again? Hell no, it sucks like badly, but it did create the right behaviors for us.
Hubert, you mentioned that it was a year and a half of different versions. Was the MVP at the end of the year and a half, or was that the new starting line to like build an MVP?
I mean, we at that point we had, we didn't launch publicly until like 2 years after we started the company. Actually, maybe even later. But we had like small group of beta customers and testers and so on. So that was the beginning, and it was it was just relatively simple. I mean, it was simple, but it depends what kind of product you're building, right? If you're solving a complex workflow, like there's only as much simplicity that you can introduce, because you need to have a bunch of entities and you need to have capture customer feedback, and you need to drive prioritization. So you need to build stuff, right? It's like it depends on the use case. If you're building Instagram, it's not like a complex initial feature set, right? But
Just photos, right?
Yeah, no, but like it depends on the problem and the market, the market opportunity. So it depends. The scope of the MVP depends on the problem that you're solving. Yeah.
Honza, you were building the MVP yourself back in the day?
Yeah, one part of the product I did, and it was a script written in R. Yeah, and it was so ugly, so ugly. So yeah, fortunately didn't have to develop a lot of the stuff of the product. Otherwise, it would like fail much faster, much faster, and fail the customers. So no.
And it took, how long did it take to really get out of that MVP stage for you guys? You were saying it was slow. You said you'd never do it all over again. Was it similar, year and a half, 2 years of building that initial MVP?
Well, actually, the MVP, we built the MVP for the paying customer. That was the thing. So it took like few weeks, months, or something like that. But then the grow, so we got revenue really fast. But then the grow was really slow, kind of slow, compared to if we would raise some money. That was, let's say, the thing that I would do differently.
Nice. Then we have next question, which is, which specific feature decisions are you most proud of and why? But it seems like, at different points in time, maybe you were involved with different parts of the product. Do you have like an early feature that you were like, this nailed it?
Like so payments, figuring out payments in our product was this shift that I had been resisting, but Richard kept talking about we should do payments, and we never wanted to accept credit cards because the last thing you want to do is store 16-digit numbers in your database. And our CTO is like, hell no, that's not coming close. But our whole industry runs on this. Like you get sent 16-digit credit cards unencrypted and deal with it. And at some point we said, let's just build, we're giving all this business away to these tokenization solutions like an Adyen. Let's just build a solution so that we can make money off that. And once we built the payments piece, that was transformational for us, because suddenly today 1/3 of our revenue is SaaS and 2/3 is payments, and our competitors only have SaaS. So suddenly we do triple the amount of revenue that our competitors do, and that became, we buy legacy providers, we move their customers onto our platform, we add the payments on top. So it became this whole thing that we could scale way faster than anyone else. So that was really one where I was like, I don't even want to touch payments. I'm scared of it. Whereas Richard said, like, no, this is the right thing to do for us. And he said it so many times that it's like, fine, I'll listen. And when we committed to doing it, it was the best decision that we ever took.
It kind of goes contrary to the advice that most founders get, which is just do one thing really well and ignore the other stuff and pay for it.
Yeah.
But this actually created a massive differentiation for you.
Yeah, and without it, we wouldn't be where we are today, honestly. So listen to all the voices, and it's funny because me and Richard, Richard is the visionary. He's always 10 years ahead of anyone else in the room, which is super frustrating at times. Richard, if you're watching this, I love you.
He's in the comments.
And I'm like, well, what's the problem we're solving today? And the middle ground is where you want to be. And it's good to know which one you are and try and find someone that pushes you out of your comfort zone. And it is good to have those conversations that get really, really frustrated all the time with your co-founder, because it drives the right conversation that you need to have to open up your mind to new ideas.
Nice. Hubert, you have a favorite feature?
Oh, well, in our case, it's connecting customer insights to the features. It's the connection between understanding the problem or what people need and what you're going to build. And that's magical. Because, if suddenly developers see the voice of the customer and they can read it and they can understand what is it that you're solving and, what problem you're trying to solve, like they can contribute not just as hey, this is the feature, but you can get the customer context and you can contribute your creativity and maybe come up even with a better solution. And that's what people love about our product the most. And then the other thing that, I love doing as a product and very design-oriented founder is like sprinkle little moments of delight throughout the product and create these positive emotions. And so we have little loading messages that give you like little quotes, and throughout the UI there's little fun things. You move a slider and it's like throws confetti at you and you hit 100%, and the copy is playful. And I always urge the product team to think about, like, whenever you're communicating something, like you can do it negatively or positively. Like when we had this limit on a plan, and we had a message that was kind of funny. It was like a whistle and like, hey, too many players on ice. And it's, it's a funny way of thinking like, hey, you have too many people. And then it was like, hey, you need to upgrade and so on. But it creates a negative emotion. It's like, hey, you did something right. There's too many people, right? And so on. Versus changing that to a message which is like, congratulations to your growth. There's the next step in order, to continue. And it's the same, it's just like positive. So anyway, so that's a tidbit that I've enjoyed just thinking about the product.
You have a favorite feature? It was the one you wrote in R?
I have I love that. I love that one. Yeah, it was like groundbreaking, definitely. But I just wanted to talk about the feature that I didn't invent it, and it's like a Heureka feature. And it was like, I think like 10 years ago, and it really helped the Heureka to grow to the like size which it is right now. And it was basically like really from this perspective, it's like a little stupid thing, let's say. And it was customer reviews of the web shops that they are there. And it was like completely new on the market, like 10 years ago. Can you like imagine? And now it's part of the infrastructure within like Central and Eastern Europe when it comes to the markets where you are like, everyone is like, there is the web shop. Can I buy there? I don't know. I will look on Heureka whether he has good reviews or bad reviews. So it's really like infrastructural thing for the whole all the markets that we are on. And it's really like small feature and being the first there.
That's awesome. So this is going to be the last question. We'll take a break. There'll be some mingling. This question is, you could write books on it. I think Hubert might be writing a book on this. Someone asked, how do you put together a well-structured strategy to align your teams, right? And there's many steps, there's many artifacts, there's many things. If you could just give one nugget to the audience.
Like if you're a founder or a leader, it starts at the top. And I think in the now, which is one of my downsides, like I need to sometimes step away from that and think in the 18 months. But if you're at the top of your organization, write a strategy document that outlines your vision for the future with some key metrics in it. And I hate doing it. I really hate it. But when I get to it, I'll write a great document, but it's just getting to it. I keep postponing it. I'd say if you do anything, write that document right now. I think that's really one of the things that I haven't done it yet for next year. So this is my moment.
You go to the woods? Do you like block a week off? Is this a Saturday job?
It's a weekend job for sure when there's no Slack or anything interrupting me. But I need to actually commit to a day when I'm away from everything and actually write it. And I'll poop it out within a day. Like it'll be done by the end of it and with real direction. But you have to choose to do it. And I haven't chosen yet this year.
Choose wisely.
I just add to this because I completely agree with you that you need to put it to writing. Then you need to bring it to life and you need to have a conversation about it with people because it's impossible to write everything. Right? It's like and you have concepts in your brain and kind of the taxonomy that you're using might not be obvious to other people who have the context and so on. So it's kind of a it's you need to go and then talk and explain. And you need to go on a roadshow. You need to make sure that people understand it in the same way. Very simple thing is like, cultural values of a company. If you put a word on the wall and somebody else comes into the company, well, it sounds like whatever. There's like a one word, on the company, togetherness. It's like, But, it's kind of like the people inside the company have the context, what it means behind it, and you keep repeating and so on. And it's like if somebody, the group of friends is having conversation and they have an inside joke, and then you just like say, "Remember that one time," and everybody starts laughing. Well, if you haven't been there, you have no idea, no context, right? So I'm trying to explain that context is not necessarily captured in everything that you write. You need to complement it and have the conversations and explain and so on. It takes a lot of time.
I totally agree. I would add to that that this letter, let's say, in our situation, we call it like strategic narrative. And I think that's the best way to start and to have it. I was like part of like working on it in like two companies during my life, and I have one like maybe it would help you suggestion. Have some pro to help you with that, some consultant or something like that, because it hurts so less.
All right. I want you guys to put your hands together. 3 great leaders of companies that are here in Prague. And you guys will be around. So if you have questions, if there was something in the list, obviously there were more questions, you can find these guys and you can ask them. You can ask them even more personal questions like, but how many real arguments did you really have? The ones they won't say on YouTube, but they'll say it, face to face. But thanks everyone. And there's drinks in the back, there's food in the back. After we turn the TV off, there'll be a QR code for feedback. If you provide feedback, we can figure out how to make these meetups even better. And I think there's a prize. I think, I don't know who gets it, but I think there's a Marty Kagan book for at least one person. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.